It was supposed to be another sunny, easygoing day in Playa del Carmen, the kind of place where vacationers sip margaritas under palm trees and forget the world exists beyond the sound of waves. But at the Cool Beach restaurant, that paradise vibe took a terrifying turn. Around midday, what started as an ordinary lunch service ended in chaos when a sudden blast ripped through the building. People dining just a few steps from the ocean were thrown off their chairs, the air filled with dust, smoke, and the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. The explosion wasn't just loud, it was powerful enough to blow apart the kitchen, crack walls, and collapse parts of the roof. Within seconds, the vibrant beachfront scene turned into one of confusion, screams, and running feet. Authorities later confirmed that the explosion had been caused by a gas leak, one that apparently went unnoticed until it was far too late. The restaurant's gas tank, quietly feeding the stoves where chefs prepared seafood and sizzling fajitas, became the source of tragedy. Investigators suspect a leak built up inside a confined area, and all it took was a spark, maybe a stove flame, maybe an electrical switch to set it off. The result was devastating. 2 employees lost their lives instantly, while nearly 20 others were injured. Some of them were waiters, cooks, and cleaners who had shown up that morning expecting another long day serving tourists. Others were customers who happened to be at the wrong table at the wrong time. Local television crews rushed to the scene, capturing footage that would later circulate across social media and news outlets worldwide. The videos showed a surreal image: tables half buried under debris, ceiling panels scattered on the sand, and rescue teams desperately pulling people from the wreckage. Ambulances lined the narrow coastal road as firefighters sprayed down the smoking remains. Playa del Carmen, usually known for its nightlife and laid-back charm, suddenly became the site of a grim rescue operation. Tourists in bathing suits stood behind yellow police tape, holding their phones up, documenting what they couldn't quite believe they were seeing. As reports poured in, the scale of the incident became clearer. 18 to 21 people were taken to nearby hospitals. Several suffered burns and fractures, but miraculously, many survived. Officials later stated that 2 of the victims were Mexican nationals working in the kitchen, individuals whose names briefly appeared in headlines before fading from the global conversation. Their deaths, though, hit home for locals who understood how dependent Playa del Carmen's economy is on service workers who keep the beachside businesses running. In the following days, city inspectors and engineers combed through the wreckage. They examined the gas systems, checked pressure valves, and tried to figure out how no one had detected the leak sooner. Rumors began swirling that safety checks had been overlooked, or that gas installations hadn't been properly maintained. Not an uncommon issue in tourist-heavy zones where restaurants run long hours and equipment takes a beating. Authorities promised a full investigation, and the event sparked wider discussions about gas safety regulations in Mexico's coastal resorts. Meanwhile, Playa del Carmen's residents struggled to reconcile the tragedy with their city's postcard image. The explosion became a reminder that even in paradise, accidents happen, sometimes with brutal consequences. For visitors, it was a moment of sobering reality amid the music and the ocean breeze. For locals, it was a painful lesson about vigilance, maintenance, and the invisible dangers of the everyday. Today, mention the restaurant explosion at Cool Beach, and people still remember the eerie images, the destroyed dining hall, the chaos, the flashing sirens against a backdrop of blue sky. The gas has long since dispersed, but the memory lingers. A silent caution that even in the most beautiful places on Earth, safety can never be taken for granted. On July 14, 2024, Pan Xiaoting, a 24-year-old popular live streamer, sat in front of her camera, ready for another one of her legendary mukbang sessions. Mukbang, a South Korean-born trend, involves eating massive amounts of food while chatting with an audience. It had made Pan an internet star, with thousands of viewers tuning in. On this day, her ambitious feast, a staggering 10 kilograms of food, including seafood, chicken fingers, and chocolate cake, would be her last. Pan's journey into mukbang started in her early 20s when she was working as a waitress. She noticed how much people loved watching others eat online and decided to jump on the trend, and it worked big time. She quickly gained a massive following, pulling in views, money, and gifts from fans who couldn't get enough of her jaw-dropping food challenges. Some of her streams lasted up to 10 hours, as she devoured plate after plate while engaging with her enthusiastic audience. But the darker side of this extreme lifestyle soon caught up with her. Pan had already been hospitalized for gastric bleeding, a clear warning sign that her body was struggling. Her parents begged her to stop, but she assured them she could handle it. By July 2024, however, she weighed around 300 kilograms and was morbidly obese, yet she kept pushing her limits for the sake of content. On that fateful day, Pan started her mega feast as usual. First, chocolate cake, then crispy chicken fingers, followed by a mountain of seafood. Her audience was divided. Some cheered her on, while others worried about her health. As the hours passed, things took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, in the middle of her stream, she collapsed. Shocked viewers watched helplessly, frantically trying to alert emergency services, but it was too late. The stream continued briefly before the platform shut it down. The news of her tragic death spread quickly, leaving fans devastated. An autopsy later confirmed what many had feared. Her stomach had ruptured. Overwhelmed by the sheer amount of undigested food, the rupture allowed stomach acid and food particles to leak into her abdomen, leading to fatal complications. Her body had simply given up under the extreme strain. Pan's sudden death sparked a wave of concern and outrage. Mukbang had started as a way to combat loneliness, letting viewers share a meal with their favorite streamers. But over time, it had evolved into a dangerous spectacle, rewarding those who could consume the most food in the shortest time. Pan was not the only one facing these risks. Other mukbang influencers like Nikocado Avocado had also made headlines for their extreme eating habits and deteriorating health. Doctors and psychologists stepped in, warning about the dangers of binge eating for entertainment, including obesity, digestive disorders, and even life-threatening conditions like gastric rupture. Despite China's 2021 anti-food waste law, which banned extreme mukbang content, Pan had found ways to bypass the rules and continue streaming, driven by fame and financial success. But was it worth it? Her story raised serious ethical questions about social media culture. Should platforms regulate extreme content more strictly? Should influencers be held accountable for promoting harmful behaviors? And most importantly, how far should people go for online fame? Pan's tragic death is a harsh reality check on the pressures influencers face. The internet rewards bigger, crazier, more extreme content, pushing creators to risk their health for views, likes, and money. If Pan had listened to her family, if mukbang hadn't become such a viral sensation, would things have been different? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing is clear, her story is a sobering reminder of what happens when entertainment crosses the line into self-destruction. For those who enjoy mukbang, it's worth remembering that behind the screen, behind the food, there's a real person. And sometimes, the cost of content creation is far too high. It's far too high. In the quiet suburb of West Roxbury, Boston, the Tai Ho Mandarin and Cantonese restaurant was the kind of neighborhood spot people went to for comfort food and late dinners. But on August 29, 2007, that small kitchen became the scene of one of the city's most haunting fire tragedies. What began as an ordinary night in a family restaurant turned into a deadly inferno that would change how Boston looked at kitchen fire safety forever. It started with something deceptively simple grease. The restaurant's ventilation ducts were coated with years of oily residue, the kind of slow-building hazard that hides behind stainless steel and ceiling tiles. For months, maybe years, it had been collecting, waiting for the right spark. And that spark came late that night when heat from cooking ignited the grease inside the hood system. The fire crept quietly into the ductwork, slipping through concealed spaces, feeding on flammable residue, and finding pockets of oxygen. For over an hour, it smoldered out of sight, turning the restaurant into a ticking time bomb. When Boston Fire Department crews arrived, the fire looked manageable from the outside. Smoke was visible, but nothing screamed catastrophe. Firefighters Paul Cahill and Warren Payne were among the first to enter. seasoned veterans who had faced plenty of tough calls before. But what they didn't know was that the blaze wasn't in the kitchen. It was above it, hidden in a double ceiling where grease-lined ducts ran like fuel lines. The air was hot, visibility poor, and oxygen levels unstable. Then, in an instant, the fragile balance broke. The moment fresh air rushed into the ceiling void, the smoldering fire found its breath. In a flash, heat, flame, and pressure erupted in a violent backdraft. The explosion tore through the restaurant, blasting flames and smoke across the structure. Crews inside were thrown into confusion. Radios crackled with distress calls, and what had seemed like a routine fire turned into a desperate fight for survival. By the time the chaos subsided, 2 firefighters, Cahill and Payne, were gone. Both men died in the line of duty, victims of a hidden blaze and an avoidable buildup of grease and neglect. In the aftermath, investigators pieced together a grim story. The restaurant had been cited before for code violations involving its kitchen exhaust system. Records showed it had been cleaned just weeks earlier, but the company responsible had missed critical sections hidden behind ceilings and ducts. Essentially, the most dangerous parts, the ones that couldn't be easily seen, were left untouched. The fire's path was predictable, and the tragedy preventable. The incident shook Boston's fire service and the wider restaurant industry. The official NIOSH report detailed the chain of errors: the inadequate cleaning, missed inspections, concealed fire spaces, and communication lapses during the operation. But beyond the technical findings, it highlighted a painful truth. Even experienced firefighters can be caught off guard by hidden dangers and small oversights. In the years that followed, the Tai Ho fire became a powerful teaching case in fire academies and safety programs. It reinforced the importance of proper ventilation cleaning, regular inspections, and awareness of concealed fire spread. For the families of the fallen firefighters, the lessons came with unbearable cost. Today, the name Tai Ho stands not just for a restaurant, but for a reminder that a kitchen's grease, when neglected, can be deadlier than fire itself. The tragedy remains etched in Boston's memory as a story of loss, bravery, and the relentless need for vigilance in the places we least expect danger to hide. October 10th, 2014, seemed like any other day for 75-year-old Vera Williams in Rhyl, Wales. She sat down for breakfast, likely expecting a peaceful morning with her tea and toast, but a sharp fragment of toast had other plans. It lodged itself in her throat, causing discomfort. It was annoying, sure, but life-threatening. It didn't seem that way. However, Vera, who had a history of severe heart disease, decided to get checked out, just in case. She headed to Ysbyty Glan Cled's A&E, where junior doctor Noor Ismail examined her. Seeing no immediate signs of serious illness, the doctor sent her home without further tests. No major concerns, just a scratchy throat that would likely heal on its own, or so everyone thought. For the next 2 weeks, the discomfort persisted, but Vera didn't immediately seek further medical attention. Then, on October 23rd, unable to ignore the pain any longer, she returned to the hospital. This time, she was seen by Dr. Adedeji Adeleke. She mentioned neck pain, but didn't explain that it had been bothering her since her initial visit. Without that key piece of information, Dr. Adeleke suspected a simple throat infection, prescribed antibiotics, and discharged her. Unfortunately, the real issue remained undiagnosed. The very next day, October 24th, Vera's condition took a terrifying turn. She started coughing up blood and was rushed back to the hospital. This time, doctors weren't taking any chances. They conducted a thorough examination, including a CT scan, which finally revealed the shocking truth. The sharp toast fragment had torn her esophagus, causing a rare and serious condition called esophageal perforation. This kind of injury is extremely rare, occurring in only 3 cases per million people. But in Vera's case, it had led to internal bleeding, with blood leaking into her intestines, explaining her worsening symptoms. At this point, her doctors were faced with a brutal dilemma. The best treatment for an esophageal tear is surgery, but because of Vera's severe heart disease, surgery was simply too risky. With limited options, her medical team focused on managing her condition as best they could. But despite their efforts, her health rapidly declined. and just a few days later, Vera passed away. Her death led to an inquest to determine if earlier detection could have changed the outcome. The investigation found that the doctors had acted appropriately based on the information available at the time. Dr. Marion Hughes, a senior emergency medicine consultant, reviewed the case and explained that esophageal tears are so rare that most doctors wouldn't even suspect them unless there were clear warning signs. Even she, with 40 years of experience, had never encountered a case like this. However, the inquest also exposed some systemic flaws. At the time, the hospital still relied on paper records, making it difficult for doctors to track a patient's history across multiple visits. Coroner Nicola Jones suggested that if the hospital had used electronic records, Dr. Adalek might have been aware of Vera's previous visit and possibly considered a more serious condition. But even if the issue had been caught sooner, her pre-existing heart condition meant that her treatment options were always going to be limited. Vera's story is a tragic reminder of how a seemingly minor incident, like eating breakfast, can spiral into something far worse. It also highlights the importance of clear communication between patients and doctors, and the need for better hospital systems to ensure that no crucial details slip through the cracks. The tragic incident at Nukadwala restaurant in Saket, South Delhi, on November 29, 2018, remains a stark reminder of how quickly life can change in the blink of an eye. Hemant, a 23-year-old restaurant staffer, was performing his routine duties inside the bustling eatery near PVR Anupam when tragedy struck. Around 6 p.m., a sudden altercation ended with Hemant being stabbed in the chest. What began as an ordinary evening, serving customers, handling orders, and ensuring the restaurant ran smoothly, turned into a scene of shock and chaos. Despite the rapid response and being rushed to Madan Mohan Malviya Hospital, Hemant was brought dead, leaving his family, friends, and colleagues in profound grief. The immediate aftermath was chaotic and heart-wrenching. Police and forensic teams arrived at the scene to collect evidence, interview witnesses, and try to reconstruct the series of events that led to such a fatal outcome. Early reports were conflicting, with some suggesting an accident or personal dispute, while Hemant's family suspected deliberate foul play. The possibility that someone from within the restaurant might have been involved only intensified the grief and confusion surrounding the incident. For Hemant's family, every unanswered question and unclear motive deepened the pain of an already devastating loss. The restaurant itself, usually a place of community and casual gatherings, became a site of tragedy. Staff members were left traumatized, customers shocked, and the entire neighborhood reminded of the fragility of life in unexpected circumstances. The presence of CCTV cameras in the area added a critical dimension to the investigation, as footage could potentially reveal the truth behind the fatal stabbing. Hemant's brother, Jugnu, voiced hope that the recordings would uncover what had truly happened, emphasizing the desperate need for justice and clarity. Meanwhile, authorities meticulously examined witness testimonies, staff relationships, and possible motives, striving to separate fact from speculation. The incident highlighted the broader, often overlooked issue of workplace safety and interpersonal tensions in high-pressure environments such as busy restaurants. Kitchens and service areas, though seemingly mundane, are often spaces where tempers can flare under stress, and conflicts, if not addressed, can escalate in dangerous ways. Hemant's death underscored the importance of conflict resolution, proper supervision, and vigilance in workplace environments to prevent personal disputes from spiraling into tragedy. As the investigation continued, the local community grappled with the loss of a young life in such sudden and violent circumstances. Hemant, described by colleagues as dedicated and hardworking, had dreams and ambitions abruptly cut short. His story became a sobering reminder that even routine days can carry unforeseen risks, and that safety, awareness, and compassion in workplaces are essential. The restaurant, once a hub of activity and laughter, now carries the weight of memory, grief, and unanswered questions. Hemant's death is more than a news headline. It is a human tragedy that reverberates beyond the confines of a single restaurant. It calls attention to the urgent need for security, empathy, and responsible behavior in everyday environments. While authorities worked to deliver justice, those who knew Hemant were left to mourn, reflect, and find ways to honor his memory. In the end, the story is a stark, somber reminder of life's unpredictability and the imperative to safeguard human dignity, even in the most ordinary settings. February 25, 2010, started like any other day in Invercargill, a quiet town on New Zealand's South Island, until Christopher Hodgkinson found his partner of 15 years, Natasha Harris, slumped against the bathroom wall, struggling to breathe. Her breaths were shallow and labored, and despite frantic attempts to save her, Natasha passed away from cardiac arrest. She was just 30 years old. Her sudden death left behind 8 young children and a devastated partner. But what made her passing even more shocking was the culprit behind it. Not drugs, not alcohol, but Coca-Cola. Natasha's Coke addiction had started in her teenage years, but over time, it spiraled out of control. By the time of her death, she was drinking 10 liters of Coke every single day. That's about 18 pints, more than 11 times the recommended daily sugar intake and twice the safe limit for caffeine. Her day started with Coke and ended with Coke, and if she didn't have it, she'd go into full withdrawal mode, shaking, irritable, and agitated. Her mother-in-law, Vivian Hodgkinson, recalled how Natasha would become extremely distressed if there wasn't Coke in the house. It was more than just a craving. It had become an addiction. For years, Natasha dealt with a laundry list of health issues: fatigue, nausea, heart palpitations, and vomiting multiple times a week. She was constantly exhausted, but no one, including her, linked her symptoms to her ridiculous soda intake. Her teeth completely decayed, so much so that they had to be removed. One of her children was even born without tooth enamel, something doctors linked to her high soda consumption during pregnancy. But the real damage was happening inside. An autopsy later revealed that her liver was swollen with fatty deposits from excessive sugar intake. She also suffered from hypokalemia, dangerously low potassium levels that can lead to serious heart issues. Pathologist Dr. Dan Mornan explained that symptoms like muscle weakness, fatigue, and vomiting, which Natasha frequently experienced, were classic signs of this condition. On top of that, the insane amount of caffeine in her system was making her heartbeat dangerously irregular. On the day she died, Natasha hadn't shown any alarming signs of illness, just complained about feeling unwell. Hours later, Christopher found her unresponsive in the bathroom. He called for help, but by the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. The inquest into her death revealed just how catastrophic her Coke addiction had been. Coroner David Crerar ruled that her excessive soda intake was a major factor in her cardiac arrest. He stated bluntly that her death was unlikely to have happened when it did, and how it did without her extreme soda consumption. The toxic combo of sugar and caffeine had thrown her body's metabolism into chaos, leading to fatal consequences. The case sparked a heated debate. Coca-Cola Oceania was not thrilled with the findings, arguing that there was no definitive proof linking their product to Natasha's heart attack. They also insisted they couldn't control how much Coke people chose to drink. In response, the coroner made several recommendations, including caffeine labels on sodas and warning messages about excessive consumption. He also urged New Zealand's Ministry of Health to consider stricter regulations on caffeinated drinks. But not everyone believed warning labels would have made a difference. Catherine Rich from the New Zealand Food and Grocery Council pointed out that Natasha was also a heavy smoker and ignored medical advice for other health issues, suggesting that her lifestyle as a whole played a role in her death. Despite everything, Natasha's family remembered her as a loving mother who put her kids before anything else. She skipped meals to make sure they had enough food and spent weeks planning their birthdays to make them special. But life hadn't been easy for her. Her Coke addiction became her escape, much like how others might turn to alcohol or drugs. It was her way of coping with feeling trapped and overwhelmed. After her death, Christopher struggled to care for their children, who were eventually placed in state care. He also faced financial and legal troubles, making an already devastating situation even worse. Natasha's story is a chilling warning about the dangers of unchecked habits. No one thinks a simple soft drink could be deadly, but her case proved just how extreme the effects can be. Her family hopes her tragic death will raise awareness about the risks of excessive soda consumption and the broader struggles of addiction. The 2023 Chinese hot pot restaurant explosion in Yinchuan, Ningxia, was one of those moments where a normal evening turned into a scene of unimaginable horror within seconds. It happened on June 21st, just as the dinner rush began at the Fuyang Barbecue Restaurant, a popular local spot where families, co-workers, and friends gathered to enjoy grilled meat and steaming hot pot. Everything seemed ordinary. The chatter of customers, the smell of roasted spices, and the clatter of chopsticks. But beneath that warmth and laughter, danger was quietly building in the kitchen, a slow, invisible leak of liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, that would soon tear the restaurant apart. According to reports, staff members had noticed the faint smell of gas about an hour before the explosion. It was the kind of scent people usually brush off, thinking it's probably nothing. But this time, it was everything. One employee, trying to be helpful, went to replace a faulty gas valve, hoping to fix the problem quickly. Instead, that single act, just one twist too many, unleashed a chain of events that would devastate an entire community. In an instant, the gas ignited, and a violent explosion ripped through the restaurant, blowing out walls, shattering windows, and lighting the evening sky in a terrifying orange bloom. The blast killed 31 people and injured 7 others, most of them diners who had been enjoying their meals moments before. The shockwave was so powerful it was felt blocks away, and nearby buildings were scorched by the heat. Rescue teams rushed to the scene, battling flames and chaos as they searched for survivors among the debris. The aftermath was a haunting sight. Tables overturned, dishes shattered, and the faint outlines of what had been a bustling dining hall now reduced to rubble. Videos shared online showed firefighters and paramedics working through the night, pulling bodies from the wreckage under the harsh glare of emergency lights. In the days that followed, the incident drew national attention. China's President Xi Jinping called for an immediate investigation and urged local governments to strengthen safety inspections across all public venues. Authorities quickly detained the restaurant's owner, shareholders, and several staff members. It was a grim reminder that even a small oversight, a neglected valve, an uninspected pipe can lead to catastrophic consequences when safety takes a back seat to convenience. The Yinchuan tragedy exposed how fragile routine can be when something as simple as a gas leak goes unnoticed or unaddressed. What made the story even more painful was the timing. The explosion occurred just one day before the Dragon Boat Festival, one of China's most beloved holidays. Many victims were out celebrating early with friends and family, never expecting their joyful night out to end in tragedy. The city mourned deeply, holding vigils and laying flowers outside the burned remains of the restaurant. Social media was flooded with messages of grief and anger, demanding accountability and stricter safety checks for eateries nationwide. In the end, the Yinchuan explosion wasn't just another headline, it was a brutal wake-up call about how fragile public safety can be. The restaurant had been a place of comfort and laughter, a spot where people gathered to share stories over food, yet within seconds that comfort turned into catastrophe. It showed that while hot pots and barbecue flames can bring warmth and togetherness, they can also turn deadly when mishandled. The tragedy carved itself into collective memory, not only for its sheer devastation, but also for the haunting realization that it could have been prevented. April 4th, 2019, was just another regular day for Darren Hickey, a 51-year-old wedding venue manager in Chorley, Lancashire. He ran Ridgemont House with pride, making sure every event went off without a hitch. But Darren wasn't just about business. He was a walking, talking example of resilience. 7 years earlier, he had survived a massive stroke that put him in the hospital for a whopping 18 months. Most people would have slowed down after that, but not Darren. He threw himself into charity work, using his experience to help others, and even won the Stroke Association's Inspirational Person of Courage Award. He was the kind of guy who didn't let life knock him down for long. But unfortunately, fate had one more cruel twist in store. That afternoon, as Darren was wrapping up work, a chef asked him to taste a fish cake for an upcoming event. Simple enough, right? What could possibly go wrong with a tiny bite of food? Well, everything. The fish cake was molten lava hot, and as Darren swallowed, it burned his throat. He winced, but shrugged it off. After all, how bad could it really be? He didn't know it yet, but this seemingly minor burn was far more dangerous than anyone could have guessed. Hours later, his throat started feeling tight and uncomfortable. The pain was getting worse, and something felt off. When he told his partner, Neil Parkinson, about it, Neil didn't like the sound of it one bit and urged him to get checked out. So, Darren went to Chorley Hospital's urgent care ward, expecting a quick checkup and maybe some medication. At the hospital, Darren explained the burning sensation and difficulty swallowing. A healthcare professional examined him, even consulting an ENT specialist from Preston Hospital. But here's the catch. The burn was too deep in his throat to be seen without special equipment. With no visible signs of injury in his mouth or tongue, doctors assumed it wasn't that serious. They handed him some paracetamol, told him to go home, and advised him to come back if things got worse. What no one realized was that Darren was already on borrowed time. Unlike regular burns that blister immediately, throat burns swell up slowly, meaning symptoms can go from, "Hey, it's fine," to, "Oh no, I can't breathe," in a matter of hours. That night, Darren tried to rest, but his condition was deteriorating fast. Around 9:45 p.m., Neil heard some strange, choking noises coming from the other room. Rushing to check, he found Darren gasping for air, struggling to breathe. Panic set in as Neil tried to help, but things escalated too quickly. Darren collapsed right in front of him. In a desperate attempt to save him, Neil called 999, but a delay in locating their address added precious lost minutes to the response time. By the time paramedics arrived, Darren's airway was completely blocked. He was rushed to Royal Bolton Hospital, but there was nothing more that could be done. Less than 12 hours after eating that fish cake, Darren was gone. At the Bolton Coroner's Court inquest, acting senior coroner Alan Walsh called the case a rare and devastating tragedy. Dr. Patrick W., the pathologist who performed Darren's post-mortem, explained just how unusual and dangerous throat burns can be. They're typically seen in fire inhalation victims or industrial accidents, not from a simple bite of food. The symptoms don't seem urgent at first, which makes them incredibly hard to diagnose and treat. The coroner also raised concerns about Darren's care at Chorley Hospital, wondering whether more advanced diagnostic tools could have caught the issue earlier. Representatives from GTD Healthcare and NHS, Greater Preston Clinical Commissioning Group, promised to review the incident to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Darren's sudden passing was a massive shock to his friends, family, and the community. He wasn't just a survivor, he was a fighter, an inspiration, and someone who made the world a little better just by being in it. His charity work and unshakable positivity touched countless lives, making his loss even harder to accept. In the early hours of June 2, 2018, the Oregon Culinary Institute in Portland was about to witness a tragedy that would shake the local culinary community and make headlines across the country. Daniel Brophy, a 63-year-old chef and beloved instructor, had arrived at the school to prepare for his classes, ready to share his passion for cooking with students who admired him. But that morning, the kitchen, usually alive with the sizzling sounds of pans and the chatter of eager culinary students, was silenced by violence. Brophy was found shot twice, once in the back and once in the chest, while performing the very act he loved most, cooking. The scene was chilling not just because of the violence, but because it occurred in a place that should have been safe, a professional sanctuary devoted to the craft of food. The discovery shocked everyone who knew him, from his students to fellow instructors, as Daniel had a reputation for being dedicated, warm, and inspiring. He was more than a chef, he was a mentor, a figure whose presence in the kitchen encouraged creativity and discipline, and whose absence left an immediate void that would only grow with time. The investigation quickly drew attention to an unexpected suspect. Daniel's wife, Nancy Crampton Brophy, a romance novelist whose writings often explored suspense and darker elements of human behavior. At first, the notion seemed almost surreal. How could someone so close to the victim, someone who had shared a life and a home with him, be implicated in such a horrific act? But as investigators pieced together the timeline, the story began to take shape. Surveillance footage placed her near the culinary school around the time of the murder, and further scrutiny revealed that she had purchased components for a Glock pistol, which matched the weapon used to kill Daniel. Beyond the immediate physical evidence, there were financial motives that investigators could not ignore. Nancy stood to gain from several life insurance policies totaling approximately $1.4 million, as well as inherit their home valued at $300,000. In the eyes of the law, these facts painted a disturbing picture of premeditation. Nancy's trial in 2022 captured public attention in part because of its macabre intersection of life and art. The prosecution argued that she had carefully planned the murder, citing her purchases of gun parts and online searches about firearm operations. The defense, however, portrayed Nancy as a grieving widow and creative writer, claiming the gun parts were for her novels and that she had no recollection of being near the school on the morning of the shooting. The courtroom drama unfolded with testimony from students, friends, and law enforcement, each piece of evidence slowly revealing the stark reality. The chef had been killed in his own kitchen, a place of trust and craft, by the person who shared his life. On May 25, 2022, the jury reached a verdict, convicting Nancy Crampton Brophy of second-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison on June 13, 2022. The case resonated far beyond Portland, partly because it mirrored themes from Nancy's own writing, and partly because it touched on the vulnerability of seemingly safe spaces. The Oregon Culinary Institute, a school dedicated to teaching creativity, skill, and collaboration, had become the site of a personal and violent betrayal, a grim reminder that tragedy can strike anywhere. Media outlets and true crime enthusiasts followed the story closely, and it has since been immortalized in a Lifetime film, How to Murder Your Husband, the Nancy Brophy Story, as well as in podcasts and news coverage. Beyond the headlines and dramatizations, the story remains a somber reflection on trust, ambition, and the fragility of life. Daniel Brophy's memory lives on in his students, in the kitchens he inspired, and in the legacy of someone who dedicated his life to teaching the craft he loved, even in the face of a shocking and tragic end. The case stands as a cautionary tale of how ambition, money, and human complexity can intersect with devastating consequences, leaving a community to mourn and wonder how such darkness could infiltrate a place meant for learning, passion, and culinary artistry. Case number 1. October 5th, 2020, started like any other morning in Jixi City, northeastern China. A family of 12 gathered for breakfast, ready to dig into a local favorite, Suan Tang Zi, a traditional noodle dish made from fermented corn flour. But what they didn't know was that their meal had been harboring a deadly secret for the past year. These homemade noodles had been sitting in their freezer for 12 months, waiting for their moment. And, unfortunately, that moment came. As the noodles were defrosted and reheated, something seemed off. The 3 youngest family members took one bite, noticed a strange taste, and wisely decided to skip breakfast. But the other 9, they powered through, unaware that this simple decision would seal their fate. Within hours, chaos broke loose. Nausea, vomiting, crippling stomach pain, and overwhelming weakness hit them hard. All 9 were rushed to the hospital, but despite the best medical efforts, 7 had died by October 10th. Just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, 2 more, including a 47-year-old woman named Lee, passed away by October 12th. In just 1 week, the entire group who ate the noodles was gone. Doctors were baffled. What could have possibly wiped out an entire family so quickly? The answer came when tests revealed the culprit, bongkrecic acid, a lethal toxin produced by the bacterium Burkholderia gladioli. This nasty poison thrives in fermented foods like corn flour noodles, and to make matters worse, it's tasteless, odorless, and heat-resistant. That means reheating the noodles did absolutely nothing to destroy the toxin. The fermentation process had gone wrong during the year the noodles were frozen, creating a breeding ground for this deadly bacteria. Once ingested, bongkrecic acid went straight for the liver, kidneys, heart, and brain, causing rapid organ failure. Without immediate intervention, which in this case didn't exist, death was almost inevitable. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. Health authorities launched an urgent public warning, telling people to be extra cautious with fermented foods. They advised against using moldy, soaked, or improperly stored grains, emphasizing that freezing alone doesn't kill dangerous bacteria. It just pauses their growth until they're thawed and ready to strike again. The younger family members' decision to trust their instincts and avoid the odd-tasting meal had saved their lives, serving as a chilling reminder that sometimes your taste buds know best. This heartbreaking incident underscored a critical lesson. Food safety is not something to take lightly. While people know about food poisoning, bongkrecic acid is far less known, but no less dangerous. In response, Chinese health officials ramped up awareness efforts, urging people to follow strict guidelines when fermenting foods at home. The government issued public safety advisories, emphasizing the importance of hygiene, proper storage, and knowing when to just throw food away. What started as an ordinary breakfast turned into a devastating reminder that food preparation isn't just about taste. It can mean the difference between life and death.